From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. We're so excited to have you with us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have an incredible show for you today. We have Don Huffines, a former state senator. He also ran for in the Republican primary for governor and is currently likely in the lead in a contested comptroller's primary. With the election going on now, we're going to hear from the third candidate. We've already heard from Senator Kelly Hancock, or acting controller Kelly Hancock, sitting railroad commissioner Christy Craddock, and today we're going to hear from Don Huffines and speak to him at length about his background, his time in the Texas Senate. In particular, he uncovered a major fraud, closed down an agency. A bunch of people went to jail. They were stealing taxpayer money. So we're definitely going to probe about that, about what's going on, his vision for the comptroller's office, should he be elected, what the race looks like. And we also have a couple other things. We're going to spend some time talking about Congressman Tony Gonzales. So this is a Republican congressman from the Valley who many of us who follow the news will remember. A real tragic event happened about 6 months ago. A longtime staffer in his office, a rather attractive 35-year-old female, set herself ablaze and died from those injuries. There's a lot of speculation about were the two having an affair, the congressman and she. The congressman went on the record and denied it. Well, we've had some things come out recently that give great pause to that statement. Great pause. And then in the middle of all the campaign chaos, something occurred, which is not insignificant. I think it was just flat out a mistake in the pace of things. But Senator Cornyn's spokesperson, and I think also has the title of senior advisor, I've known the guy for many, many years actually, put out in the public arena on X and perhaps otherwise, what used to be Twitter, put out that a hit on Congressman Wesley Hunt. And in doing so, he included his Social Security number and his home address, which is illegal, right? These folks have been targeted by so many radicals that made it illegal to circulate it out in the public arena. So that was a mistake by Cornyn's staff, and I have not seen Cornyn apologize. In fact, quite the opposite. So we're going to get into that. So we have a great show today, anchored on Don Huffines, a candidate for comptroller, who we're going to have on in just a second. And remember, follow us. You're listening to Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. We're on all of iTunes and all the podcasts. You can listen to us there. But go to the website and sign up for our newsletter. Engage in some of the petition drives that we're doing. We want to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, for example. We want to lower property taxes. You know, all these guys talk a great game. Oh, we're lowering your property taxes, and we get our bills, and they just go up, up, up. We need to band together. So go to politicswiththebigdogs.com. Join our newsletter. Let's speak with a one united voice, and we'll get this done. All right. Right now, we're going to turn it over to who I call Senator Don Huffines, a former state senator until about 2 years ago, as I recall, perhaps 4 now. Here we go. Senator Huffines. How are you, Senator?
I am fantastic, Anthony. Great to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much. Many of the folks, our listeners, are conservative activists across the state. We're familiar with you. You've run for office before. You were elected as a state senator. But I'd like to back up a little bit. And you and I are new to each other. I think we've met along the way, but I don't really know you. Usually I know most of my guests who come on here pretty well. Can you tell us your life pre-Texas Senate? Tell us about it and what brought you to, what gave you the calling?
I'm glad you asked. I'm a 5th-generation Texan. I was born in Dallas, Texas, grew up in the Metroplex, and I graduated from the University of Texas with a finance degree. Been married to my wife, a perfect wife. I call her my perfect wife, for 38 years, and we travel together on the campaign trail quite a bit. We have 5 grown children now, 4 sons, 1 daughter, and we homeschooled them and throughout their schooling career to ensure they would, grow up in a conservative Christian environment, and they did. And now they're all married, and we're grandparents 13 times over in just 6 years. So it's a great new chapter in our lives. And just to give you a little background, I have 4 Longhorns out of that bunch and 1 Horned Frog. So they did great. And all my sons were Eagle Scouts, and I was Scoutmaster, and So we had a great growing up with them. The foundation, Anthony, of my life is Jesus, family, and business in that order. And I'm in business. I got my real estate degree I got my real estate license when I was in Austin at UT. I started my business really in college and never looked back. I really love real estate. I'm one of the largest developers in the Metroplex, and I've developed all over the state and a little bit out of state. And I just really enjoy the risk taking in it, the sense of urgency that has to go with making decisions in business. I also have experience in other industries in business, from oil and gas to construction business, home building business, and also venture capital. I have a venture capital company. I think having a broad range and deep range of business is very important if you're going to be comptroller, because we'll go into that in a minute, but that's extremely important to run the ninth largest economy in the state. In the world, if you're going to run the state finances. And I've certainly been doing that for 40 years and running a lot of businesses. On the political front, I've always been interested in liberty and freedom, ever since I was in high school. And I went to my first county convention when I was 18 years old, about 2 weeks in Denton County. And there wasn't many Republicans back then. But it was a great experience. I've supported and worked in college and for a lot of Republican candidates, and since then over the years, whether it was Bill Clements or John Tower run a U.S. Senate race. It kind of tells you how old I am, but I was pretty young when I was helping them. I've been a delegate to at least a dozen state conventions, the last 5 national conventions, and I just have a passion for our GOP, the Grand Old Party. The reason I decided to run for the Texas Senate was because I was very frustrated, along with many Republicans, that our legislators were not paying attention to our party platform. I knocked out a 20-year-plus incumbent Republican in the primary, just he and I. I was the first Republican to ever beat a sitting incumbent in the Texas Senate, heads up, without a runoff. And that was Senate District 16. It was the north half of Dallas County. It was just in Dallas County. He was one of the most liberal Republicans. He was the most liberal Republican in the Senate, according to all the rankings. And when I got a PhD, what it's like to be in the legislature. It's not what I thought. Let me tell you that. That was a real elected office holder I've ever been to. And it's just not. As a business person, we're used to solving problems, monetizing the solutions with a sense of urgency. And that's not how government works. But I can go into more details, but I'm taking up too much of your time. And
No, yeah, this is great. And I do want to jump in. So if you're just joining us, Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs, we're with Senator Don Huffines, not a sitting senator, state senator at the Times, but I'm going to call him Senator Huffines. He's earned the title. And I heard a number of things in there that struck me that I didn't know about you. So we're really excited to learn. You guys were homeschooling before homeschooling was cool. I mean, you've got grandchildren. You homeschooled all 5 of your kids. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. It really was. All my relatives thought we were certainly crazy, and the kids would be terrible, and they'd never get into college. They would have no social skills. And, of course, none of that's true.
Yes, sir.
That's why I didn't mention the college part, because it's just rebuff that, narrative that you hear that, they're never going to get in a good school. As a matter of fact, one of my sons played football for UT, and I started the first 11-man homeschool football team in the state of Texas.
There you go. Look, that's enough to get elected on. That's a big deal. Homeschooling, 11-man homeschool football team, and producing Eagle Scouts. Look, what we do in our lives and our families is a great reflection of who we are and what we value. So I wanted to stop and honor that. Everybody's talking about politics, and we'll get into that, no doubt. I also heard you say, hey, I went down to UT, I got a finance degree, and while I was in undergrad, I went and got a real estate license. That's above and beyond. Very few people have the maturity. I certainly didn't in undergrad. I went to UT for undergrad and law school, and I didn't have the maturity to do something extra. And you jumped into the real estate business. It's really interesting to me. And then I got to say, I'd almost forgotten that you took out an incumbent in the primary in that state Senate, which just doesn't happen, folks. It was brave, it was courageous, it was a big deal. And what I heard for the first time that I'm aware, I vote and live outside of Austin, is you did it in large part because our elected officials weren't following the party platform. All of our listeners get that, right? Top to bottom. But again, you were doing it before it was cool. So how was that to feel the Austin Swamp go against you, trying to defend their 20-year incumbent, number one, and then number two, when you got there, it's just so hard to force change. You may know this, but throughout my career, I had been consultant to the Republican House caucus in one session, the Republican Senate caucus right after your time in the Senate, actually. So what was it like to go against the Swamp in that primary, number one, and then number two, just how hard was it to push the stone up the mountain when you got there?
Well, thanks for those comments. It was very difficult. It was an epic campaign. It really was. At the time, we spent together a record amount of money anyone had spent in a primary for a Texas Senate seat. And Dallas is a special Senate seat. It really was at the time. There's a lot of money in Dallas, and Dallas is a very powerful city. So people, really paid attention to the race. The establishment was all lined up behind my opponent, John Cornyn. And, of course, and he spent over $5 million and I spent $3 million, raised a lot of money and I won. It was a close race. I didn't win by much, 650 votes.
But a W is a W.
Yeah, that's right. Second place in politics is last place, as we all know. But it was an epic struggle. And then when I get there, we had 8 new freshmen when I was in the Senate. I really thought that people would be motivated to solve our problems and certainly be motivated to follow the party platform. And that's just not the case. And I worked hard to build a relationship with my fellow Republican senators. It's only 31 state senators and it was only 20 Republicans. A lot of people kind of forget that. It's a very small chamber, a lot of decorum, a lot of rules there that people don't know about. You cannot bring any beverage into your seat. You can't go past the rail. Your staff can't go past the rail. You have to wear a suit and tie and you have to be polite. And there's no time limits on the debate. It's real different from the House. Very different.
Yes, sir.
And you don't see how people vote. It's kind of secret votes of hand signals of ones yes, twos no. And I like to mention this, for your listeners, that no vote when I was there, for 2 sessions that ever came to the floor of the Senate did not pass. Every time something's coming up, it will pass because you have to get 2/3 rule or 3/5 of the senators to agree to bring it up before it would get there. So everyone knows how the vote's going to go down in the Senate before it happens. All the debates for show. It's just for show. The deals are done ahead of time. So now an amendment to a bill could be different, but it's a very unique place. I learned the hard way that people are not, like I said, they don't have a sense of urgency. Politics is that way. They're not looking to solve problems. As a matter of fact, they create a lot of problems and trying to solve problems. So then the next session, they come back to fix the problems they created in the first place.
So I'm going to interrupt here because you raise a great point that I don't think we've talked about on this show. And again, we're talking to Don Huffines, candidate for Comptroller, former Texas State Senator, a thought leader, a Christian. This is Anthony Holm with Politics with the Big Dogs. Go to politicswithbigdogs.com, sign up for our newsletter, and we're talking about his time in the Texas Senate right now. And this is hugely important. Insiders take it for granted. Y'all listening. Anytime an issue hits the floor of the Senate, it's decided. And one of the ways that the issue doesn't get to the floor of the Senate is 2 or 3 Republicans quietly join with the D's and say, hey, don't bring it up because I'm not for it. The debate is largely for the voters at home, and that's why so many bills are killed quietly without any individual having to step into the light and take responsibility for that. And Don Huffines, when he was a state senator, is explaining to us the shock. And it's such a good point in there. look, if you have something more to add in that nugget, I'd like to hear it. But I also want to make sure that we get to, my understanding is you exposed a pretty big fraud while you were a state senator. So any other thoughts on the gamesmanship in the show, right? I forget the name of the movie where everybody's watching the guy who doesn't know his name. It's basically the Texas Senate.
I'll just tell you two quick examples and let's move on from there. I was the first senator to file constitutional carry, and it was the number one priority of the Republican Party at that time. And you just wouldn't believe how freaked out the Senate got. And the gyrations they went to make sure that bill never came to the floor. Also filed a bill to get rid of the franchise tax, the margin tax for businesses. I'm a businessman, and it was a great piece of legislation. It was over time, like an 8-year period. It had a lot of provisions in there in case the revenues for the state weren't quite where they needed to be. And yet, again, it was the Republicans, unfortunately, and Democrats too, that stopped that legislation. And my opponent in this race voted against that legislation. And so I have the record to being a taxpayer champion. And I worked hard for the taxpayers, was the business community, individuals, or any taxpayer in the state of Texas. And I can tell you more stories about that, but that gives you two examples of how the rules were manipulated to make sure neither one of those pieces of legislation could be voted on because they didn't want to be accountable.
And listeners, this is a huge point. I forget it, and we probably all forget it because, frankly, you all, the activist base of Texas, has had so much success recently. But just a few years ago, it wasn't very long ago, the entire elected legislature pretty much was terrified of constitutional carry, right? You guys changed that. I go back, I'm 53, I go back to 15, 18 years ago when I was the lone wacko trying to get voter ID. The Republicans in the House were opposed to having a photo ID as a mandate to vote. Now we're bashing the most liberal extremists for that. So the mindset of the legislature has changed so much, listeners, and Senator Huffines was one of the people who helped advance that. So yeah, let's go on. I want to understand this corruption scandal because I remember it. I think some folks going to jail, but I don't remember the details. Give it to us. You were a state senator, right?
Yes. Just quick rewind. I want to just reiterate that.
Yes, sir.
I promised the voters I'd be conservative, and I was always ranked one of the top 2 most conservative senators when I was there by all the scorecards. So I just want to point that out. Everybody running for office, Republicans, say they're conservative. All of them, without exception. And let me tell you, I've got the track record and the receipts to prove it. And most people that say that, of course, they know they're not conservative, right? I'm just saying that it's a profession of liars. It is. They know they're lying. They're not telling the truth to the voters, and it's okay. I mean, that's just how it operates. So
fair enough. I don't dispute that. Professional liars.
But that's the nature of the game. So let's just talk about that corruption scandal for a minute. And that's one of the main reasons I'm running to be the next comptroller, the chief financial officer of Texas. And that position is so underappreciated and so vastly important that people really need to know. Because corruption is real and corruption is rampant in the state of Texas. Rampant. People think that Texas is clean. It's 100% not true. When I was in the Texas Senate, all my property tax bill in Dallas County was an obscure government agency. It had a countywide property tax, had an elected countywide board, and they were spending way over $100 million, had at least 2,500 employees. And on my bill, it said Dallas Equal Fund, and I couldn't figure out what that was. I started digging into it, just asking simple questions, and it turned out it was Dallas County Schools. That's not Dallas Independent School District. It's a separate organization. And I said, what is that? Because I wasn't even in the Dallas County. I wasn't even in Dallas School District. So it's very confusing. I started looking into it, asking them questions, found out what they did. Why do you exist? Well, how were you created? What's your purpose? What problems are you solving? And things, just common sense. Question.
Common sense of government. Go imagine. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Yeah. So let me just look at your financials. And they were doing all kinds of gyrations, and they provided transportation to some of the ISDs in Dallas County, including Dallas Independent School District. So they had thousands of school buses. They had their own software company, law enforcement division. They had their own property, barns, bus barns, real estate, office building they built. Anyway, we started holding hearings in Austin. I did about them. And it was obvious there was problems. Texas Rangers, I got them involved. Then we got the Dallas DA, and then the FBI got involved. Bottom line, they were stealing millions of dollars from Dallas County taxpayers in a Ponzi scheme. Millions, not thousands. We never know exactly. And I got a legislation done to close them down. And it was the largest takedown which passed. And we closed them down overnight. But that was the largest takedown of a government agency in modern Texas history.
Sure.
It had never been done. And it was a lonely battle, Anthony. It really was. No one helped me. Really no one. I got the bill done, so some Republicans voted for it. But my opponent in this race never helped. And he represented part of Dallas County. He never came to my rescue. We had to have an election, countywide election. He never said, hey, Huffines, what can I do to help? These are a bunch of crooks. The only help I got from anyone was the investigative reporters in the NBC5 affiliate here in Dallas, DFW. And they had the bandwidth to go to chase down the Porsches and the condominiums they bought with the stolen money in New Orleans and Chicago and all the crooks. And 6 people went to prison, pleaded out. So a lot of people don't know about it because they pleaded out. They didn't have trials. The FBI said they were too busy. A lot more people should have gone to jail. But the mayor pro tem of the city council of Dallas got 7 years for taking bribes.
That's incredible. Hold on. Let's stop. That's incredible. The number 2 councilman in the city of Dallas, is that right?
That is correct. Dwayne Caraway, he got 7 years for taking $450,000 bribes.
From this education group, the Dallas County that you uncovered. All right, folks.
Yes. 1
term in the Texas Senate, FBI, 6, not just 6 indictments, 6 folks serving time, 1 serving hard time, real time, 7 years, city councilman, public corruption, closed an agency. And this fraud in the schools and the government-run schools is everywhere, but it's not limited to the school system. We have fraud up and down the Texas budget is what I'm hearing as your position. Is that fair?
That's totally fair. And one thing I will do point out is we didn't merge this group with another organization. I locked the doors, changed the locks, and sold the furniture. It's never been done that way. Right.
Understood.
And when we got into the building, they had put pornography on all the computers, so we couldn't get to the financial statement. Information. They spent $1.3 million or maybe more hiring the best lobbyists they could to defeat my audits and to defeat my legislation to close them down. I want to make sure everybody understands the scale. They spent in 1 year what the state of Texas spends in 10 hours. They don't exist anymore. I'm the only person including everybody in office and certainly running for any position in the state of Texas that single-handedly took down a government agency that was with an elected board and put 6 people in prison. So I say I was dodging before anyone knew the word.
Fair. And look, folks, I want to take a moment here. Let's talk about some of the things. They spent $1.3 million minimum in our tax dollars to hire Austin lobbyists to stop a conservative senator from rooting out their own fraud and corruption. This is one of many, many examples why we need to go and advance the policies of the party platform, which is banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. And what happens? This is my words, not the senators. My observation over 25 years in this space is elected officials, legislators in Austin want to bury their heads in the sand and pretend that there's no fraud out there because they may catch some of the muddy water. And what the senator just said was, hey, we didn't go and merge this. We actually closed the door, shut it down, and sold it. And you all out there might think, oh, yeah, well, of course, that's common sense. But that doesn't happen in government. They just give it a new title. They move the bodies around. They keep taking your tax dollars and funding the same version or a similar version of those entities. Stopping and closing a program is almost unheard of. That's a big, big deal. Thoughts on that?
Well, it is a huge deal. I don't think it's ever happened. Even the Sunset Commission can't do that. And, all these agencies have to go through that process and they never get closed down. It's a failed process. Government of Texas is massive. And I want to point out to you that my competition that's running, Hancock, never voted, was against me on constitutional carry, was against me basically on Dallas County schools, against me to get rid of the franchise tax, the margin tax. So there's a big separation, obviously, between me and him. He was basically always with the establishment there. And when it came to the party platform, which I carried with me all the time, I was just always surprised how few state senators had ever read it or even been to it. My opponent has never been a delegate or an alternate to a state convention. Never. And, so they don't understand the grassroots. They don't understand the Republican Party. They don't understand how important our philosophy is. And that's a huge problem we've got across the state. And I want to tell you, I can jump in, Anthony. Also, when I was in the Texas Senate, according to Patsy Spall, the Secretary of the Senate, she's been there forever, great woman, and that I'm the only elected office holder in the history of the state that they could find that never took any money from the government, the taxpayers. No pay, no pension, no health care, no per diem, no reimbursements, no travel vouchers, nothing. And I worked hard to make that happen, and I'm going to do the same as Comptroller. I'm not in this for a new job. I'm in it for the taxpayer, the government. And I told people I would do that. Nobody believed me, but it's because the government didn't hire me. The people hired me, and I worked for the voters. I worked for the people, and that's what makes this position so important and so valuable to Texas.
Understood. And so like President Trump, you're going to not accept the salary. You're going to give it back to the taxpayer, not accept all the benefits that come with office. And I do want to make sure our listeners were clear. You have at least two major candidates running for comptroller. You've named Senator Hancock, but also Christy Craddock. I wouldn't be surprised if there's others on the ballot I'm not familiar with, but the three of you are all in that race. So I do want to flag that for all of our listeners just to make sure that we have clarity. I almost don't know what to say. It's interesting to me. I'd like to go deeper on this. I'd like to get you back and figure out how we expose some of this corruption systematically, and perhaps it's in somebody in the comptroller's office. But before we go to that, Charlie Kirk. Right. Many of us were following Charlie Kirk. And I gotta be square. I followed him, but not as closely as I did until after he was assassinated. And I heard a lot of similar statements and a lot of similar people jumping on. But my understanding is that you were associated or a devotee before his death. And in fact, he's personally endorsed you in this effort. Tell us about that relationship and what Turning Point has meant to you, please.
Well, I first met Charlie in 2018 and went to his events. He always had these great big events and then his donor meetings. I donated money to him to get, because I really believed in Turning Point, his organization. So whether we were at Mar-a-Lago or wherever we were, I was always trying to be there and encourage him. Actually, I gave a speech a couple of times in front of all those kids, his people that were members of his organization. There's 2,000 of them, and we had just tons of fun doing that. I could shoot T-shirts off in the cannon and stuff. And he puts on a great show. I mean, he did. His organization is the best. I mean, he had the smartest people, the smartest young people, and what he was doing is totally changing the world. not
Agreed.
the USA. I mean, it was changing the world, so I was always helping him out any way I could. Of course, with President Trump is the same, 16, 20, 24. So we were all aligned on all that. But so I knew him, and I told Charlie, I said, Charlie, I want to run for comptroller. We talked about the position. This was way over a year and a half ago. And then we discussed it. And he said he wanted to help. And then he said, then he gave me the great endorsement. I said, Charlie, a couple of months later, I said, hey, I really like to get your endorsement. He didn't normally endorse down ballot. He would go federal races was his focus. And, Charlie and I were together for 3 days at the Kerry Lake election in Arizona. I supported Kerry Lake for governor. I was there to help her on the border policies. And she wanted to adopt my border policies for Arizona. So we were going over that. And I brought some of my team members up there to help her. And we sat there on the recount for 3 days. And Charlie's from Arizona. And so was Steve Bannon. So we sat there and visited for 3 days. There was only 6 people in the room. And for a long time trying to get the vote count. It's more than you want to know. But the bottom line is Charlie knew that what I'm going to do in the comptroller's position doesn't just affect Texas. That's why he was willing to weigh in on it early, because he knew that what I'm going to do is going to affect the whole country. It's going to ripple, and the halo effect is real. Texas, of course, is the foundation of liberty, not for the U.S., but for the whole world. For the whole world. That's why
I believe that. I agree. I believe that strongly.
And it's a fact. Everybody knows that. The left will never give up on getting Texas because they know this is this is the foundation. If they take Texas, they take the world. They don't take the U.S. They take the U.S. At the same time, they take the free world. So it's imperative that we have liberty lovers and people that have the courage. And that's what Charlie said. He said, I'm the only candidate running for this office, really any office in Texas, has got the track record and the courage to bring Donald Trump's sense of urgency and leadership skills to the state. And that's what I'm going to do.
And folks, urgency, you've heard it said on this show now a number of times. It is everything, because we think, oh, you have 4 years. No, you don't. You got to go fight the swamp. You got to overcome the institutionalized actors who are in there who don't want change. And I'll give a shout out to President Trump in his second term. He came out of his first really understanding that. And every single day matters. You have to have an internal clock ticking backward in your head to affect change, material change at government. Okay. Taxpayer funding to illegals. Number one, I'm surprised to learn that we have Texas tax dollars flowing to illegals. So tell us about that currently, and then tell us how that would change if you were elected comptroller.
Well, first, let me just give you a little scale on the comptroller's position.
Please, absolutely.
It puts everybody to sleep, but it's important to understand. First and foremost, that when our state was formed and the last state constitution was written after Reconstruction, 1870s, the cowboys that wrote that, and they're very wise, they wanted to make sure that the legislature never handled the money, and they wanted, nor the executive branch. They wanted the person that handles the money to be reported to one group, period, and that's the people of the state of Texas. I could lock the governor out of the building if I want to, and Bullock used to do that, by the way. I'm going to work with the governor. I'm going to work with the legislature, but they don't control me unless they pass legislation to control me and put guardrails on me. I report to the people of Texas, and that's my passion, is the people and the taxpayer, because I know the money belongs to them.
Of course.
Me, it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the government. Nobody in Austin thinks that way. They don't. They just think it's water, manna from heaven, and they're just going to use it any way they want. But it's our money.
100%. And look, folks, they want to curry favor with our money. And they say, well, it's the government's money. It's not the government. It is our tax dollars being recirculated. And frankly, it's the outrage that comes with that some some fraudulent group that you were able to shut down is taking our tax dollars, recirculating them into Austin lobbyists to try to oppose that effort, right? Like, this is the epitome of outrage, financial outrage for me. So please.
Totally. And I have 3,000 employees, have 600 auditors. We're spending over $500 million. It's approaching $600 million a day in Texas. $350,000 every minute of every day.
Tax dollars. 350,000 tax dollars.
Of your money every day. 200 state agencies, over 200 state agencies. I oversee all the spending. I collect the comptroller's office collects all the money for the state. Every dollar the state gets in goes in the comptroller's office. The comptroller tells the budget, sets the budget for the legislature, what they can spend. It manages the money, which is about 130 billion in cash on any given day. But the best part of it for me, Anthony, is that I have eyes on the spending. And we spend that kind of money, what I just said, every day. And I'm going to turn half my auditors loose to audit government, because I know I'm a businessman and bringing the private sector mindset to the government sector is that a dollar saved is a dollar earned. Of course, everybody in their own home knows that. I know how hard the taxpayer we work to be financially independent and have money for our family and ourselves. And so I'm here to make sure we save that money. I'm taking a constitutional perspective, the state constitution, that any government that touches taxpayer money, I've got a fiduciary responsibility to investigate it, to make sure we're not getting stolen from, there's not fraud, and there's not waste in the money. And let me tell you, it's deep and vast, the amount of waste and fraud in the state of Texas. Just anecdotally let you know, when I go around the state, and I'm running a great campaign, I'm going everywhere at 5 events on Saturday. By the way, I'm leading in all the polls. But mayors of cities hand me a dossier, a file, begging me for help with the fraud that's going on in their city. County commissioners beg me for help. School district board members beg me and just say, here's all the information of what we've spent years researching where people are stealing money, and they can't get any assistance. There's nobody for them to call that's going to show up. There just isn't. Well, I'm going to show up at Harris County, for instance. There's a lot of fraud and we have one, Tom Ramsey, he's there trying to help, but he's outvoted 3-1. And so there's a lot going on that I'm going to lend my resources to. I have 83 attorneys in-house in the comptroller's office. I have auditors. I've got my own law enforcement division. I'll rely a lot on the AG's office. They're going to litigate it against me very soon as I get there, because I've got a lot of things I'm going to do on day one. Let me just tell you, the motto of my business is seeing beyond the obvious. Seeing beyond the obvious. And you got to think about that, but it's very productive. People say, Huffines, what are you going to do? And I say, just remember my motto. It's not going to be obvious. So to answer your first question, how am I going to get about illegals? Texas is my Huffines Liberty Foundation. Our research shows that we're spending about $8 billion a year educating illegals in our government school system that aren't supposed to be here. They're illegal. And they're not spending that in other states, of course, North Carolina or wherever, that we're stuck with because we're a border state and the federal government won't secure it. So I want to do an accounting. 1,200 ISDs, over 12. I want them to tell me, the comptroller, before they get their school money, they got to tell me how many children are in that district that aren't supposed to be here. As simple as that. Let's just get an accounting so we know what we're talking about.
Fair.
That seems very logical. I want to do a very detailed accounting from the hospitals. I know they're trying to turn in some stuff now, but I don't trust it. I want to do it for Texas Department of Correction, the border plan, Operation Lone Star, all of that. Texas taxpayers are spending vast sums of money because Biden left the border open, and so did every president before Biden. Before Trump. And so did every governor of the state of Texas, for that matter. But we got to get our money back. We got to get control of the situation. And I think just doing that would cause a lot of self-deportation.
So if you're just joining us, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs, and we have Senator Don Huffines, former Texas state senator, candidate for comptroller, and he just said one of the most seemingly obvious statements, but I assure you it will put fear into every person in the Texas Capitol. Look, seeing beyond the obvious, that's really interesting slogan. I get it. Now I understand we are, in particular our hospital system, forcing higher taxes in these little hospital districts. It's become quite a game in Austin, passing legislation to get a new tax in a hospital district, and then those locals are funding the hospital, which is spending a lot of money on people who are not here legally, who are illegally in our state and hoovering up our county resources and our state resources. And okay, then what do? Can we get the feds to pay us back? I mean, how do I get recovery as a taxpayer? Like it's audacious to me that I'm hearing cries that the Social Security system I've been paying into forever and a day is on the verge of bankruptcy, but there's no pending bankruptcy for all this fraud and funding of illegals. Like, what do we do as a nation?
Well, that's a great question, Anthony. And look, I'm here to work with the legislature. I'm going to be hand in hand with the legislature, work with the governor. It's probably going to take a lot of things that we need to get done. Is going to take the legal act, legislature's got to act on a lot of things. And I'm always working when I was in the Senate real quick to get everybody to work together. As a matter of fact, I hosted the first joint caucus party when I was there, and I paid for the whole thing so the House Republicans could get to go to the Senate Republicans because there's this internal squabble. And that's the first time they'd ever had the caucuses together at a party or a function in 20 years.
That's amazing. Who'd have thunk it?
I know. I'm here to get everybody on the same page and do what's best for Texas. And our governor is going to help with that process. But I do think the federal government needs to be notified of what they've done to the Texas taxpayer. And can we recoup the money? I think our members in Washington need to be working hard on that. And we need a special program where it's not a one-time 1-year program where they give us the $12 billion they owe us for border security, whatever. Maybe it's over time. Maybe it's with the highway system. We finally get more money than we've been putting in on the highway program and things like that. So there's different ideas that we can come up with that we can get reimbursed over time for the money that they owe us.
And I know you and Senator Cruz in particular, you have a lot of relationships with House members, Republican House members, but you and Senator Cruz in particular. So maybe you guys can talk about that if you end up in that spot on the backside of all this. Well, Mr. Huffines, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your time here today. Is there anything that I failed to ask or otherwise that you want to share?
Well, I do. Yes, and I'll make it quick. I mean, the campaign's on fire. I have a strong lead in all the polling. My goal is to win this outright. I've been endorsed by every conservative organization in the state of Texas. Ted Cruz came in early for me. Riley Gaines has endorsed the campaign. Of course, you mentioned Charlie Kirk, of course, Ron Paul and many others. 75% of the SREC, unprecedented, a state Republican executive committee has endorsed the campaign, or national committee men and women. The two former chairmen of the state Republican Party endorsed the campaign, Alan West and Matt Rinaldi. Vice chairman of the national party, former vice chairman Tommy Hicks endorsed the campaign. I could just go on. And I'm going to leave out a lot of great patriots if I do, but just every group. And they're endorsing me because they know that I've got the track record. They know I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And first and foremost, they know they can trust me. And that's important. I mean, it's everything for anyone is to trust.
Yes, sir. And thank you so much for your time here today. And God bless you and your family. And we'll get you back on the show soon.
Anytime.
Thank you.
God bless you. And God bless Texas.
All right, folks. Again, you're listening to Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of the podcast platforms or across them all. Listen to all of the other shows, follow us, and make sure, please, that you're signing up at politicswiththebigdogs.com for our newsletter and sign some of these petitions. We're forwarding them to your elected officials we're segregating by your address and sending them in on your behalf. Let's ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. Let's ensure that we're lowering our property taxes. So I learned a lot there. I suspect you all did too. So Don Huffines, much as he said, in the model of Donald Trump, didn't ever take a pay. He didn't take a paycheck. He didn't subscribe to the retirement system when he was a state senator, and he has pledged to do the same should he be elected to comptroller. We also learned that he rooted out a fraudulent, little mini Minnesota, what we call a mini Minnesota event here in Texas a few years ago, and a bunch of folks went to jail and they pled out, and the FBI got involved, and we heard it from him. So I vaguely remembered it, but I didn't remember the scale or the magnitude. I was impressed by that. He suggests, and I think he's probably right, that a huge state government like ours has a whole bunch of other things that need to be examined and potentially investigated. So that struck me. And last, all of us many of us have seen that the Huffines family through an LLC bought a ranch in New Mexico. I just don't think it's that newsworthy. It was 4.5 years after the fact. It was in an auction. It's more of a campaign gimmick than anything. We try to be substantive. And if something changes and I'm wrong, then I'll go back and revisit it. But I did want to acknowledge that. I don't think buying a big ranch and converting it into a Christian center or frankly even converting it into a neighborhood, which is what Don Huffines has done with many times with pieces of property in the past, is inappropriate. So I'm going to move on through that. We're going to stick to the high road and substantive issues on this show, and if it needs to be revisited, new information comes out, then we'll revisit it. Fascinating, interesting, 3 candidates in that race, likely to go runoff, in my opinion. We'll see what happens and where that ends up. Now, at the beginning, I teased out a couple different things. One of them was Senator Cornyn's staffer, a longtime spokesperson for the campaign, and my understanding he's a title of senior advisor. I've known him a long time, nice enough fella. I think he just made a mistake. I think sometimes things happen in campaigns and you go and you make a knucklehead move. I didn't know, from my perspective, it wasn't that big a deal. Effectively, it's this. They, being the Cornyn campaign, were attacking Wesley Hunt for potentially not being honest about a vote. I believe Wesley Hunt was overseas and he tried to cast a vote at that point in time, and it may or may not have been made. Wesley Hunt says, no, I did it. I'll just share with you all. That happened to me one time. I had to go to the embassy. It was a real thing. I'm real suspect if my vote got counted or not. At some point I had to go see. But Wesley Hunt said, no, I voted, and here are the steps we took. And a Cornyn staffer went and said, no, you didn't, and here's paperwork. Well, and in publishing that paperwork out into the public arena included his Social Security number and his home address, which is illegal, right? These congressmen and a number of elected officials have been protested and targeted, and we saw that the U.S. Supreme Court, somebody was stalking, trying to attack, if not kill, a U.S. Supreme Court justice who was apprehended, and the guy was put to jail. So Congress, and I believe a number of other legislatures and other number of states around, said, hey, you can't go and put this stuff in the public arena. Cornyn's team did. It was a mistake. It was a violation of the law, no doubt. It's a crime, period. But, did he intend to? Was he aware of it at the time? Did he think, this is against the law, I'm going to go break it anyway? I doubt it, right? What troubled me was Cornyn's response, at least to the extent that it can be attributed to the senator. It's made on X and on the social medias that said, hey, you're dodging the question. Well, hold on a second. Just apologize, right? And this is going to dovetail into our next segment. Tony Gonzales, a congressman from the Valley who's been exposed as a liar, which is a very different thing than an adulterer, just straight up. So just go and apologize and say we shouldn't have done it. It was a mistake, and we deleted it, which they did, by the way. So, look, we'll see if the authorities do anything, and it's a campaign season, so they're all going to go back and forth. But I'm troubled that folks won't just own their mistakes. I mean, I make them every single day. Heck, I'm the father of 2 daughters, so I am reminded daily at all the mistakes I make. Just own them and move on, right? And Cornyn should have just said, we shouldn't have done it. I apologize. Interestingly, Paxton came out and said that shouldn't have happened to you. I'm sorry it did. You got little children, some version thereof. And Hunt is like, thank you, right? Showing grace. Now, grace at the expense of his competitor, it's not lost on me. But it takes us into, and there's a through line in this, which is the same spokesperson for Senator Cornyn is associated with Tony Gonzales, is my understanding, and advised him on his communication efforts. So Tony Gonzales is a Republican congressman deep in the valley, a younger guy. I'm 53, so younger to me is probably 40s. And he had a rather attractive staffer, a 35-year-old woman that had been on his staff for a number of years. And they were seen together frequently. And this poor young lady who was married and had a young child went into a depressive state and had a lot of mental health problems. And it was speculated by many, many people in the community and around the congressman that the two of them had had an affair, and that's where the depression came from. He was fiercely denying it over a number of months. And sadly, quite tragically, in September of last year, this young lady doused herself in gasoline and set herself on fire. And her last words, as tragic as they are, is, "I want to die." And she was saying these last words, I understand it, to her mother. It was either in her mother's house or a home they were in together in Uvalde, Texas. And her mom found her and watched her largely pass. Well, a lot of speculations, a lot of media inquiries from the press to Tony Gonzales. Hey, weren't you having an affair with her? It seems odd that she'd set herself on fire. She was depressed, all of this. No, I don't know what you're talking about. People are throwing stones at me. Totally inappropriate.
In politics, you better have thick skin, and my name's on the door, and so I'm not like people throwing rocks at me, saying ugly, nasty things. I totally get that, but the rumors are completely untruthful.
It has now been exposed this week in copies of text messages that, in fact, this young lady who committed suicide said, I had an affair with a congressman, and you're going to be okay, to another staffer in the past tense. It appears to me, as all of this is pieced together, that both married Congressman Tony Gonzales and his married staffer had an affair. It ended, my guess would be 2024 from the series of events, but it's a guess only. And she went into a state of depression and ultimately committed suicide in a really devastating way in front of her mama and left behind a young son and otherwise. And like almost in a scarlet letter style fashion of guilt, I want to die. What's troubling there's so many things troubling about this tragic situation, but that here we have another elected official who will walk up to the camera and say, all of that is untrue. I never had an affair with that woman. This is two things. It reminds me a lot of Clinton, right? In an abusive, powerful situation, and then looking America in the eyes into a camera saying, I never had sex with that woman. I didn't have any sexual relations with that woman. These elected officials who think that they can, one, do anything they want and sleep with staff and everything else. And sadly, many of us are conditioned to expect and believe that too. And then second, the fact that you can lie about it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for fighting for conservative values, for being a champion for liberty. Sign up, politicswithbigdogs.com. Join our newsletter. God bless you and God bless Texas.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holmes is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Learn more about today's guest and hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holmes, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.